Hello everyone. If you clicked on this video, you probably know what Scratch is, or have at least heard of it. It's a platform for creating and sharing projects, generally based around coding. I remember playing games such as Paper Minecraft in elementary school, and honestly, considering the limitations, there is some pretty amazing stuff on there. Earlier last summer I decided to revisit Scratch, and actually use it to learn some basic programming. But revisiting the website, so much was different. And over the summer I began to see how much Scratch had changed. Not only did they revamp the website, the whole studio had changed as well. However, there were barely any new blocks. And when comparing Scratch 2.0 and Scratch 3.0, you can tell a major difference in the scale of the updates. But don't get me wrong, I like Scratch. I think it's a fun tool to mess around with. I also believe that it is good for teaching, to an extent. My main issue is with the platform itself. So I decided I would make a video about it. So let's take a look at Scratch, and see what went wrong. And when. In early 2003, an idea for a program where you could code by dragging blocks together, was proposed to the National Science Foundation. However, it wasn't until 2005 when Scratch was introduced into the Computer Clubhouse, an American organization that taught young children from the ages 10 through 18 how to program. This is where they first tested Scratch. The results were positive. So in May 2007, Scratch was released to the public, as version 1.0. The last 1.x version of Scratch was 1.4, and it would be replaced in May of 2013 with Scratch 2.0. This update was positively received by the community, and this version remained on the website for nearly 6 years. In 2018, Scratch had announced 3.0, which promised more sprites, sounds and ways to communicate. This update also changed the project viewer from using Flash, meaning users could run it on mobile. These aren't bad updates necessarily, they are actually pretty good. But let's compare version 2.0 to version 3.0. So first of all, it seems like every major update has had a change to the UI. We can see this in 2.0 and 3.0. Next up is procedures. This allows users to create custom blocks or functions. This is a super big update, and allows code to be cleaner. Cloning basically allows tiling and duplication of sprites. If it wasn't for this, games like Paper Minecraft and Scratch Area wouldn't exist. Cloud data allows data to be stored on the server. Vector graphics are math-based and can scale infinitely with no aliasing. Anyways, let's go on to 3.0 updates. Stage moving is mostly just preference. Some people dislike it, but I don't mind. Improved paint and sound editors are decent. New website looks nice to me. Some people don't like it though. Most of the stuff is just individual blocks. The thing is, this update is actually smaller than 2.0. This list is only longer because they list individual blocks. So you can see that 2.0 paved the path for many great games, with features like cloning and cloud data. But 3.0 just makes things easier. I think Scratch realized that more and more people are using Scratch for art and music and decided to improve those aspects. Hopefully 4.0 will improve coding, but who knows. So, now that you know the history of Scratch, let's focus on the future. Obviously no one can tell the future, so this is all just speculation, but I tried to get other users' opinions as well. I personally think Scratch will become less useful for teaching, because it's getting easier and easier to communicate with computers. Now back in 2003, I'm sure those blocks simplified the lines of code by a lot. But as we move forward, what can be done with a few lines of code will be far less complicated than putting together blocks. I made a post on r/Scratch and got a few interesting responses. Let's take a look at them. Not OWO says,
Scratch is already dead. The sheer amount of low-effort idle clickers, mass reporting, and bad moderation will cause the user base to dwindle as more and more people either grow out of using Scratch or leave due to the terrible moderation. At this point most of the platformers are generic side-scrollers with a cube as a character, and the comment section is hardly better than it was a year ago. It's only a matter of time before Scratch implodes from mass reports crushing the popular projects or becomes obsolete as the popular people grow out of the outright childish nature that Scratch has become. Scratch is a ticking time bomb.
Melixney says,
Scratch has already died. It's becoming increasingly filled with garbage and low-effort projects rising to the top. And Scratch 3.0 is ugly and inconvenient. I don't think that it's actually dying because the user count is growing extremely rapidly, but the quality will go down with more users. And it will soon become almost impossible for new users to get noticed by the Scratch community.
While I agree with these two statements, this next user has a take on it that is important to keep in mind. Let's hear it from Minecraft Pro 1025.
Scratch isn't dead, and it won't die for a while. Those projects we call cringy and unoriginal are just amazing to the people Scratch was angled towards, 6 through 10-year-olds. Sure, we will grow out of it, but Scratch will never die.
So now we have a basic understanding of how Scratch got to this point. Next I want to delve deeper into why. What made people quit Scratch, what different factors are playing into its downfall. But the point of this video isn't just to state what's wrong, I want to brainstorm some ways to fix these problems. So without further ado, let's continue. Before we start this section, I want to point out something. Scratch is aimed towards a younger audience, so of course the moderation will be strict. Take YouTube for example, they won't even allow comments on videos made for kids. However, there are still some major flaws in Scratch's moderation, so I wanted to go over this topic anyways. Back before 2013, there was a group of people called the community moderators. This group would help new users, and moderate the main website as well as the forums. So, how did one become a community moderator? Well, it's pretty simple. Every year an election was held, only users who passed certain requirements were allowed to run. Only 4 of these elections ever occurred before the program was cut. It was replaced with Scratch mentors and Scratch helpers, and after 2013 moderation would be done by the Scratch team. I wasn't able to find much about how moderation works, but it seems as of now the moderation team consists of only 8 people. This is incredibly low, especially when considering there are almost 66 million registered users. So I'm sure there is some sort of auto-moderation going on here. One example is, if a project gets a certain amount of reports it will be taken down, automatically. This is the cause for something called mass reporting, where 1 or more users will report a project or user in order to get them banned. So an easy fix would just be removing it, right? Well, not really. This feature is actually pretty useful, and if it was removed, projects would have to be reviewed manually. In July of last year, one of the 8 moderators I mentioned earlier, Zachary, said this about it.
We are working on ways to improve the system. Something in the system has been changed already. Depending on the results, there may be more changes on the way. But I don't think we're going to remove the system altogether. That seems too drastic of a change.
In most cases when a project gets taken down, that user also gets temporarily banned. So why is this such an issue if it's only temporary? Well, when you get in trouble for something you didn't do, it's pretty upsetting. Especially if something you worked hard on got taken down. Unfortunately, there's not much you can do to stop this. And we shouldn't necessarily blame Scratch for this happening, but the people who mass report instead. So, now we know about the problem. But how do we solve it? It's hard to come up with an exact solution, but here's an idea. First, start off by improving the banned account page. As of now the message that I got was pretty vague. I think an ideal banned page should specify exactly which rule you broke, and what content broke the rule. Whether that be a comment or a project or your account. I created this mock banned page as an example. But this doesn't stop anyone from false reporting. I can easily report a project, reload the page and report again. An easy fix for this is to allow only 1 report on a project from a single account, or better yet, 1 report on a project from a certain IP address. These are all just ideas though, there is no way to tell how they would work on the website. If you have any better solutions, feel free to leave them in the comments. In the end, moderation will always be a problem, because the meaning of justice is different for everyone. So, let's move on from this topic, and talk about something else. Ever since the dawn of time there has been featured projects. Well, maybe that's a bit of an exaggeration. But as far as I know, the featured section has existed on the Scratch website since 2007. Using the Wayback Machine, I was able to take a look at some of the old featured projects. It's safe to say the quality has definitely improved since then. It's kind of surreal to look at comments from the early 2000s and think that those kids are now adults. But that's not the point of this section. Let's talk about featured projects. First of all, I want to make sure that you know how the Scratch team decides which projects get featured. Basically, there are some features in a project that the Scratch team is looking for. Let's take a look. Now that's all fine and dandy. But I have no clue why projects like how to make mini pom-poms get featured. Honestly, this project is so uninspired and boring, not to be rude. In fact, I probably wouldn't even care if the project hadn't been featured. Here's the thing though. Not all featured projects are like this. But every time something like this gets featured, it brings all of the featured projects down. It's like a band. If one instrument is out of tune, or offbeat, or messes up, then the whole band sounds bad. And you can look at it that way if you want. I thought that for a while, but here's a better analogy. Think of a baseball team in school. There are some really good kids on the team, and some younger not so good kids. The coach has to make sure every kid gets a chance to play, even if it causes the team to lose. The Scratch team has to include everyone, even if it seems like it's their choice who they feature. And I don't think we should ridicule them, or the projects that get featured. I mean, imagine you're the one parent in the crowd yelling boo, when one of the kids gets 3 strikes. You would look like a huge jerk. So I take back what I said before, about how to make mini pom-poms. Yes, maybe that project is just a slideshow, and maybe it's just pictures from the internet. But imagine how the creator felt when their project was featured. It probably made their day. I see a lot of people complain that the featured section is filled with things like music and art, when it should be mostly games and projects. I think those people fail to see that Scratch isn't just meant for making games. Actually, in the thesis presented to the Department of Electrical Engineering and Computer Science, Dave Feinberg says,
computers are such an educational medium because they offer ways to create, design, and invent, especially through the use of programming languages. Children can use programming as a means to explore complex creative ideas by making artwork, presenting stories, developing games, etc.
And when testing their program, back in 2003, the Scratch developers asked 30 youth, if Scratch had to be something not on the computer, what would it be? And the most common answer was, sketchbook, or a piece of paper. In fact, some of them didn't even know what a programming language was. So I'm not surprised that Scratch is promoting art and music, because if they didn't, you'd be surprised how many people would leave Scratch. That doesn't mean Scratch can't improve their promotion system though. I have some ideas about it. These are all based on my opinions. If you agree, that's great. But these aren't really necessary additions to the website. My first idea is multiple featured sections. Take a look at YouTube for example, they have multiple trending sections for music, gaming, movies, etc. For Scratch there would be something like, music, games, and art. This would allow more projects to get featured, and make it easier for users to find what they like. Another idea that goes along with this, is tags. The creator of a project could add different tags to their project like music or game. So let's say I made a game about making art, I could add the art tag, and the game tag. And this would make my project easier to find by people searching for art games. Lastly, I think Scratch should improve their search engine. As of now you can only sort by trending and popular, they could easily add things like, sort from new to old, or old to new. And even better, sort by tags. Then I could search for something like candy. Sort through the results from new to old, and then show only the projects with the music tag. These are all just ideas, but I genuinely think they could improve the website by a lot. That's all I have to say about project promotion for now. Let's wrap this video up. I just want to thank you for watching this far. This is my first video, so feedback is appreciated. Anyways, you're probably wondering what my conclusion is, the solution to all these problems. Well, it's pretty simple, but you're not going to like it. Leave Scratch. Yes, quitting Scratch is the most logical solution. Let me explain. One of the main benefits of using Scratch is the community. So, when the majority of that community is young and immature, the older users will leave. People aren't quitting Scratch because it's dying, or because it's broken. They're just growing out of it. Maybe from their perspective, they think it's gotten worse, but like I said earlier, the statistics prove otherwise. So yes, the solution for you is to quit Scratch. If it isn't fun for you anymore, or you find the projects to be low quality, then maybe you're just maturing. And maybe the Scratch team will listen to our ideas. Who knows? In the end, Scratch will survive.
So sweet.